I never met Rab Nota Greenblat. I never walked through the shul that he davened in. I never walked through the hallowed doors of his day school. I've never even been to Memphis, Tennessee. And my friends, I believe that that is a great advantage. Why? Because you and I have something in common. Most of you, not all of you, but many of you have also not heard of Rab Nota Greenblat. Many of you have not walked through the shul that he davened in and never seen his day school, never been to Memphis, Tennessee either. And therefore, we can relate. We can relate together to discover, to understand about one great man and the power of one great man and what one man set out to accomplish on his trek through the extra mile. That's what we're going to see today. And we're going to see it together. Because today is Tisha B'Av, yes? It's another Tisha B'Av, still in Gullus, yes. Another film, another Tisha B'Av, another message, another attempt, another try to get all of us together, Klal Yisrael. And the key words, of course, are Avos Yisrael. And the key words are, can we make a difference? Can we make something different this year that will actually transform the things that have happened over the past 2,000 years to wipe out the sinas chinam, replacing it with avas chinam? You and I both know that that is the purpose of today. And that's why you're sitting there, and that's why you're watching and hoping that something will touch you. I believe that this man has the capacity to do that. When you watch him and you see what he accomplished, you will say, maybe there's a piece of Rab Nota Greenblat in me. That would be something. That's the beginning of change. That's the beginning of accomplishment. That's how we make a difference. So watch together as we go together today and take this walk on the extra mile and learn about one extraordinary human being and the possibilities and the things that he can accomplish and did. Through that inspiration, we can make this Tisha B'Av truly very different. Let's walk.
My parents grew up in Russia, in a town called Chernovitz. They came to America in 1976.
My youngest daughter was 5 years old. My boy was 13. And we came to Memphis, Tennessee.
The possibility came up for my father to open a bakery.
They needed a loan. He tried to get a few people to help out so it wasn't one person giving such a big sum of money.
He went to all his Russian friends, and a lot of people told him no. He went to Rabbi Nota, and Rabbi Nota didn't even think twice. He just provided them with the money with no questions asked. Just, here's the money, and when you pay me back, you're going to pay me back.
After they opened that bakery downtown, many years later, they opened up another bakery. It was a kosher bakery and a kosher restaurant. Rav Nota gave them a hechsher.
Rabbi Greenblat used to say, Gregory, in that bakery on Shabbos, even a fly not supposed to go in.
My parents had a huge account with a restaurant in Memphis called Steak Escape. These baguette rolls for their steak sandwiches.
So Thursday night they would be working really late, then they would deliver the bread after work hours. However, a hiccup happened, a major one. Thursday night came and went, and Friday the workers just didn't show up.
My wife came home and said, Greg, get up. Your workers didn't show up and we in big trouble. We need to make the rolls because if not, he's gonna sue you.
That night, my father came and he made the rolls. On the way home, they saw Rabbi Nota walking and realized that somebody was watching the bakery and drove to Rabbi Nota's house to let him know that we were open on Shabbos.
Nota shut them off, made them close their bakery. So everyone thought that's how the story ends. Actually, that's how the story begins. Because the next day, Reb Nota goes over to them and says, I want you to know this is so not personal. What can I do for you?
Even after we lost our hashgacha, he still was there for us. And that's just that sincerity that he had of just being who he was. There were no shtick with him. He was just a genuine person who cared and loved every single yid, no matter where they were in their lives.
My great-uncle, Reb Nota Greenblat, was born in 1925 in Washington, D.C. His father, Reb Yitzchak Greenblat, was Rav of the Voloner Shul in Washington, D.C.
When my father was about 6 years old, my grandfather decided to move to Eretz Yisrael. They moved to Yerushalayim, and my father was put in Eitz Chaim.
Reb Nota, even as a child, distinguished himself as a very bright Talmud. He was considered at the top of the class. In 1939, they moved back to America.
He then went to learn by Reb David Leibovich in Williamsburg, the original Rosh Yeshiva of Yeshivas Chavetz Chaim.
Reb David gave him a directive that if you go on the right path and your erlich, you'll succeed. And that really drove him for the next many, many decades of his life. He left Chavetz Chaim and joined Reb Michal Feinstein's Eretz V'Racha in Boston.
Although my father then was 15 or 16, he attached himself to Reb Michal, and they became close. Afterwards, Reb Michal came back to New York to his uncle, to Reb Moshe, and he brought my father with him. And that was the start of a lifelong relationship my father had with Reb Moshe.
He learned by Reb Moshe for a good number of years, and all the while he was growing in the area of Lumdus, but he became a tremendous Bal Halacha as well, someone upon whom Reb Moshe came to rely to answer the shilas that people would call Reb Moshe with.
Aber der manche I know things, you see, and it's regular anoge. That I know it didn't happen when I was there, because I was Ramoshe day and night with him.
He was on the first boat back to Eretz Yisrael after World War II, the first boat that was let back. It was an older chavrusa of Baruch Mordechai Ezrachi Shlita.
My father attached himself to the world of Torah. Whenever there was a Talmud Chacham anywhere, my father would look him up. Whenever he would travel, if there was someone that he could talk in Torah with, he would look him up. It was his passion and his thrill. And Eretz Yisrael was full of Talmidei Chachamim, and my father had relationships with them all.
After his experience in Eretz Yisrael, they came back to America. He was 23 and a half years old.
He saw an ad in the newspaper that the city of Memphis was looking for a chazan and a Talmud Torah teacher, and he went.
There wasn't a whole lot of Torah Judaism in Memphis in the 40s. Most people, even if they came to shul, they'd go to synagogue on Shabbos day, and then they'd go open their store on Shabbos.
Soon after he got there, he understood that Torah is not going to survive with the afternoon Hebrew school system, and he embarked on establishing a day school, the Memphis Hebrew Academy.
Everybody was opposed to them. The rabbis of the town were opposed to them because they had the Sunday school system, and to a certain extent it was also their livelihood.
But he was fearless. He saw that this was crucial, this was important, and he was willing to put everything on the line to start that up. The first couple of years they didn't charge tuition because he wanted to make certain that no parent would have a reason not to send their child there. And what that entailed, the fundraising that went on, and all the doors that they knocked on, pleading with parents to send their children to the Jewish day school.
Well,
lot of survivors, having come from Europe and from the Holocaust into Memphis, and then having their children going into the academy was not the simplest of all endeavors. There was some resistance, and my parents were no different. But he was very instrumental, and they convinced my parents to send my brother, Harry, and myself to the academy.
He never received $1 from the Margolin Hebrew Academy. He started the school. He never was paid. He taught as a volunteer. In the beginning, taught Aleph Base.
I was the first class. We were not a very cooperative class. Here was someone who was a Gaon. And here he was, when I look back, he was teaching a class, Aleph Base. And it took him 2 years. Even after he stopped teaching there, he would come in and substitute. He was always involved in the furthering the academy.
He continued to shepherd it throughout the years to make sure that the school continued on the derech that he wished. That the Rebbeim should be imbued with that spirit of Torah, that the children would see a vision of God in the eye of the Rebbe.
If Rav Nota Zal did not do what he did, there would be no Memphis. There would be no Jewish community. There would be nothing.
Starting the Hebrew Academy saved our family and many families, and many families and people are from because of Rav Nota.
I found out later that he was asked to start the academy 1 year later. Instead of starting it right away, I don't know if it was a delaying tactic or just they wanted him to be more organized before jumping in and doing it, and he would not listen. If he had not that year, then I would most probably never have gone to the academy. My life would be completely different. I can't imagine what it would be.
There are literally thousands of students, and once you start multiplying their children and grandchildren at this point, who are all living Torah lives and have had Jewish educations and a true commitment and connection to Torah, and it all comes back to that tremendous amount of dedication and hard work that Rav Nota put into founding the day school and maintaining it in its early years.
We started the school. One of the meetings for the Rabbi Yancey Spot in those days was sitting next to me. I said, you know, we have to set up some kind of a fund. Up to that point, it was just talk. We need some money to get the school started. So I wrote the first check for the academy. The rabbi was sitting next to me, says to me quietly, it's too much for you. I was making $3,000 a year, not a week, a year. He said, it's too much. So I said, just imagine if a Meshulach came, a collector came, and he said he's collecting money to build the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim, to build the temple. Of course, he said, the Almighty is going to build the Beis HaMikdash. But imagine it. And I wrote a check like this. Would you say it's too much? I answered. Now, it turns out, Baruch Hashem, that the school that we started and built is the Beis HaMikdash. That's why Memphis is Memphis. That's why no Orthodox synagogue in Memphis ever went conservative.
Because of Rav Nota's influence, then all these children who didn't come from any place, they grew up in a Torah environment and they influenced their parents. Once you got the parents on board, then it was another growth spurt.
My father-in-law grew up in Mississippi, and my mother-in-law grew up in Memphis. They had a strong Jewish identity, but they were not from. And when my oldest brother-in-law was born, so Rav Nota came around the house and sort of convinced them to send their son to the school. My father-in-law became Shomer Shabbos from that point on. He never obviously learned in yeshiva. He wasn't a learned person, but he had tremendous respect for Rav Nota. And that story repeated itself many times, many people in Memphis.
What kids can do, nobody else can do.
What does that mean, Dad?
You tell Ben Schaefer to get up in the morning, he should come to shul on Shabbos. He'll kill you. He'll murder you.
Yeah. But if the kid gets up, he holds that his head, he says, I want to go to synagogue, he takes it.
They went ahead and realized what Yiddishkeit was, which never prevailed in Memphis prior to that. And little by little, it became the city that it is.
Nota felt that Judaism will only exist where there's Torah, and where people are devoted to Torah and were willing to sacrifice for it.
His avoda to Kadosh Baruch Hu was going to take place by being Kovei himself in Memphis and seeing to it that Memphis would become a tremendous Makom Torah.
He did whatever he had to do. Whatever was needed, he went ahead and he did and he mastered.
He really sacrificed himself to do the things that he did. And he did just about everything a Jewish community could need with halachic expertise.
He was a shaykhit, he was a chazan, he was a mayel, he wrote gittin, blew the shofar, davened, just about everything.
He was into every sphere of halacha, and he knew it from a practical point, not just from a halacha issue. He knew everything. It was unbelievable.
When you were around Rav Nota, you just felt you were around someone who had complete mastery of Torah and halacha. There was just nothing you could bring up or nothing you could discuss with him that he wasn't ready to have a full conversation.
Whatever shaila there was, he was ready. The answer was always, yeah, Avada, or Avada nid. Like, of course, or of course not. Those are the basic two answers. And then you knew, histalik min hasafek, you knew you had spoken to a Gadol Yisrael. He had Shas in front of him, and he had spoken.
If you saw him on the street, you wouldn't know that he was from Tchochem or Rosh Hashiva. He didn't look like an old rabbi from yesteryear. He wore a regular sport coat, tan pants.
He dressed like an ordinary person. He didn't put on any rabbinic airs, though he knew much more than almost anybody else. He didn't want to flaunt it, and he didn't believe that you had to dress a certain way to impress the people.
Some people are more concerned about the way they look to others, but he was more concerned about how he's going to connect and bring the next person up and bring their neshama to a higher place.
He was so strong in himself and his own Yiddishkeit that he really was able, by the strength of his personality, to really change the whole community.
He knew how to build balabatim. Rav Nota understood that the nuts and bolts of a community are not the rabbanim. The rabbanim are the ones that are supposed to be the empowerers, the enablers.
They needed to have Rav Nota who exemplified that ability to be able to relate to people on all levels, and he could relate to them and their shilas and their different situations that they were in. He knew how to answer them and be with them.
I asked him once, why don't you make an early Shabbos? He says, everyone else in the city, all the rabbanim make early Shabbos. He said, what happens if someone has a shaila? What happens if somebody drives in off of the highway? Everybody else are there, make Kiddush, and they're eating. He says, I'm the only one that they could call.
Wow, I'm watching this together with you, and it is truly remarkable. A man not even married finds an ad in a newspaper, runs to Memphis, Tennessee. Before you know it, the whole community is completely transformed. It doesn't happen overnight. He works hard. All the work that's put in reaps fruit. He has a community that's his now, but that's not enough. That's not enough for him. He has to go the extra mile. And he finds out about other communities. There's Phoenix, Arizona. There's Tyler, Texas. There's Birmingham, Alabama. There's New Orleans. There's people that need to be Masada. There's Erevin. There's Brisson. There's all kinds of activities that need him. And he says, that's me. I'm going. I don't take pride, but I take pleasure. And then I say it's not enough. That is the key. Watch how one man not only transforms a city, but transforms a country and changes Yiddishkeit throughout America.
My grandfather's sense of responsibility came from looking at the Jewish people from a big picture perspective. He felt a deep achrayus for Klal Yisrael and for Yiddishkeit in America, particularly for communities that didn't have leaders.
Rabbi Greenblat came to the South at a time when they were closing the door to orthodoxy.
everything was really closing up and going conservative. He was really trying to fight the tide. It was an unpopular stance.
He lived in a small town and he impacted small towns throughout the South his entire life. And he believed that. He didn't just do it. He didn't do it because that's where the Parnassa was. He did it because that's what he believed was something that somebody should be doing. And that's the message he gave all of us when we talked about maybe going to New York or going to Florida or Chicago, was they don't need us there. Lakewood doesn't need another From Jew. They have so many of them.
Habbatas Torah should be not just for specific communities, but it should be shared with all American Jewry, with all world Jewry.
His mission was that there had to be Torah and Klal Yisrael and Kedusha in the United States.
He cared about other Jews. It was pretty simple. He cared about other Jews that were from Mississippi or from the country of Colombia.
He was the rabbi of all the exiles. Reb Nota traveled all the length and breadth of America, taking care of Jews.
When my parents moved to Tyler, Texas, they were conservative Jews. My mom realized, as well as my dad, that if they want the children to be religious and they're learning about religion, then they're going to have to start becoming more religious. So they started going to Dallas, and they met someone when they were in Dallas to buy kosher food who said, if you want to be, religious, you want to get more information, there's a rabbi named Rav Nota Greenblat, and he actually travels a lot. And he could help you in your path to becoming more religious. They actually called Rav Nota, and Rav Nota said, interesting. And he said that there's 3 things you really need to be a frum home, a religious home. He said you have to keep kosher, you have to keep Shabbos, and you have to have Tahara Mishpacha. You need family purity. So the parents, okay, well, what does that entail? He goes, you need a mikvah. Now, you don't have a mikvah in Tyler. It's 2 hours from Dallas. So my dad said to him, okay, we'll build a mikvah. Rav Nota was like, really? They're going to build a mikvah? He saw they were very serious, and it took about a number of trips, but they actually built a mikvah in the house. Because of Rav Nota doing that we were able to have a frum home, and the kids grew up religious, and they kept Shabbos, they kept kosher, and they really were able to develop that path.
My grandfather was somebody who took his responsibility to Klal Yisrael to a level that was unparalleled. And that meant that any need in Klal Yisrael was his personal need.
He was full of energy. He would go anywhere. He wasn't in for the money. He wasn't in for the covet. He was in it for Klal Yisrael.
If you give him a job to do and you'll pay him, he wouldn't do that. He wasn't interested in the money. You say, can you do me a favor? Oh, yes, that he'll do.
He built mikvahs all over the country. He built Eruvin all over the country. We built an Eruv together in Phoenix. I don't know how many times we walked around that Eruv until it got built.
There was no self. He would do anything and everything for another person. Chesed was his middle name.
He was so famous for helping people with gittin, any matter involving Jewish divorce, whether it was administering those divorces, doing whatever he could to help.
We're talking about gittin in drug cartels in South America. We're talking about gittin in jails. Many wild instances that there you have this goin muflig, this goin otzim in Torah, and he's talking to people who you and I might cross the street if we saw them coming. And he's sitting there writing gittin for them.
A friend of mine who's learning Shal Yashuv Yeshiva, Reb Nota walks in. He goes up to him and his chavrusa, and he says, tomorrow morning, I need you to come with me to do a Mesiras Saget. 5 o'clock in the morning, we're going to meet at the Denny's over on Queens Boulevard. They looked at him like he was out of his mind. It's like, we're going to a treif restaurant for breakfast? He says, no, the woman has no time to receive this get. Or she says she has no time. She's not willing to do anything to receive the get. But she said that she'd give us 5 or 10 minutes while she's eating her breakfast in Denny's. So one of the greatest rabbis in the United States, and 2 yeshiva bachrim, who are the witnesses, go into a treif restaurant at 5 o'clock in the morning, and in between her pancakes and her coffee and her bacon, Rachmana litzlan, he gave over the get, suffered whatever indignity she had to say for him. She was very uninterested in it, but she did receive the get, and they signed whatever documents needed to be signed, and gave her what she needed, and went off.
Recently, I opened the drawers and I see so many torn receipts from the tickets after tickets after tickets, and I can't throw any of them away because it's so chashuv. These were the tickets that brought so many people happiness, that either they got a get or they got a bris.
mother was remarkable in the support that she gave my father. My father would be out of town for most of the week, very often for the entire week. And that's not easy for a woman to be by herself, but she respected the sincerity, the Ehrlichkeit, and the mission.
She told me many times that she didn't think she would marry because she wanted to make sure that the husband had a tefillin in the morning and there wasn't any boy that was from or religious in the entire Jewish area because there were very few Shomer Shabbos.
I asked my father once, what did he see in my mom? He said she was the only Shomer Shabbos in town, so that was number one. And he had heard about her grandfather. Her grandfather had a dry goods store, a little store, and he would not open up after the Shabbos until the children would tell him that there were 3 stars. He didn't trust himself. And my father felt there was an Ehrlichkeit, an integrity there.
They had a very respectful marriage, and part of that respect was that they each operated in their own domain. He operated completely and totally in the world of Torah. Everything he did from the morning to the night had to do with learning Torah, chesed, tefillah. That was his whole life. And she really allowed him to do that.
He saved thousands of neshamas. Also that his interaction with the people, he was a master communicator.
Often when you have somebody who's an absolute genius, they can't talk to people who aren't. But he was able to communicate and connect with people from all walks of life, all levels of religion, all levels of intelligence, different cultures.
There are many, many young rabbis that were influenced by him, gave them a sense of value and a sense of appreciation for Torah, for his mission in life, and for his kirov.
I learned a tremendous amount about the Torah from him, about Psak Halacha. I asked him thousands of shilas.
He was someone that was very confident, and that confidence didn't come from arrogance. That sense of confidence came from he had spent a lot of time sweating away, toiling on whatever it was that he had learned and felt that he had mastered. And if he had arrived at a position, he was confident that he was seeing that correctly. And he wouldn't back down.
He always knew who he was and what he was. He never questioned his mission. He never doubted himself. He never thought, maybe I can't do this.
We're outside of the yeshiva. I was walking the Rav, and he tells me, Yonasan, I'm going to open up a yeshiva for Mitzuyanim. I said, Rebbe, it's a really good idea. Now, at the time, Rebbe was already 90 or a little bit over 90.
A lot of people would think it's too late to start yeshiva. I mean, he's like 30, 40 years too late. But to him, it wasn't a matter of whether it was going to succeed or fail. To him, it was a matter of you just do. You do it.
It wasn't about him. It was never about him. He came with the same straw hat that he wore his whole life to say this year every single day in yeshiva. And it was never about what I'm doing. It was about what HaKadosh Baruch Hu and his nation need.
My father-in-law, Larry Brown, grew up in a traditional home. He went to an afternoon school at Talmud Torah, but was not an observant Jew at that time, did not keep Shabbos.
I was a typical teenager, running around town with my buddies.
My father befriended him, and my father asked Larry why he doesn't come to the shul on Shabbos.
My father-in-law said, Rabbi, I have a paper route. He says, and how much do you earn from your paper routes? 4 paper routes, I earn $1.50 every Saturday. He says, what should be if I give you $1.50 to come to synagogue on Shabbos? He said, you're willing to give me $1.50 to give up my paper route on Shabbos? I'll come to Shabbos. This meant to my father-in-law that there's something more valuable than entrepreneurship. There's something more valuable than a paper route. There's something more valuable than money.
My father did give up that paper route, and he did do some learning as a result of it. He set my father on a path to Yiddishkeit.
And to this very day, my father-in-law lives and breathes Reb Nota. Reb Nota is his source of all the chiyas, of all the joy that he has in his spiritual world.
They have generations of B'nai Torah, of educators, of scholars, of Talmidei Chachamim, and children, grandchildren, great-grandchildren. We have so many things that we do that many don't know about or many haven't participated in, and for $1.50 or whatever it would be, or for just caring and being involved with these neighbors and friends, we can interest them in our wonderful lives, and you'd be surprised what an impact you could make.
One small deed can have major ripple effects, and it can affect generations and generations to come.
Rav Nota, his whole life was impacting Jews, every person he came across. And it wasn't big things.
He was so selfless, and he was so loving, so kind, and so courteous, so courteous.
Jeff Addis never had a yeshiva background. Every Shabbos afternoon, after Mincha, between Mincha and Ma'ariv, Rav Nota would learn with him Chumash Rashi. Rav Nota would sit there and he would translate it, and then they go on to the next pasuk. And, you know, Mr. Addis would read the Hebrew, he would translate the English. That was the Seder. When you're talking about somebody who was a Gadol B'Torah, he had Daled Chalkei Shulchan Aruch at his fingertips. And he made time to sit down and learn with somebody who just lacked that yeshiva education, but really sincerely wanted to learn.
So many times people sell themselves short. You know, like, what can I do? I'm just one person. How can I impact? Rav Nota is really an example of someone who just really cared. He cared for Jews, he cared for other people, and he really wanted people to be closer to Hashem.
He could have said, you know, I have so much Torah learning and so much knowledge, why am I going to waste my time with these simple people, so to speak? But he didn't. He sat there and he learned with them because every neshama in Klal Yisrael is so special.
That's how we inspire people, one person at a time, one conversation at a time. You need to love Hashem's children. You need to care about a Jewish boy who delivers papers on Saturday. You need to have patience for a man that comes to your minyan on Shabbos, every Shabbos for years, and still holds the siddur upside down.
A person can have so much impact just from the strength of his personality.
He was a role model. He was a role model in every possible way.
Felt like he was my father. I could name hundreds of people who can say the same thing because they really felt that way. And the love that they felt was reciprocated.
I felt a soul connection to Rav Nota. He was everything. He was just...
His legacy was, don't make it about yourself. Look at HaKadosh Baruch Hu's demand and requirement of you, and make that your only drive and determinant in what you do in life.
Find a need, find something that you can do to promote Yiddishkeit, to help Klal Yisrael in your own unique type of way. And if you know what you're doing, like you used to say, you go with the confidence, you go with an Ehrlichkeit, and you're for sure going to be successful.
Der Rebbe hat so gesagt, auf Yiddish, first let me tell you in Yiddish. Me geht auf den gleichen Weg, und me weiß, wo me geht, und me meint ehrlich, musste matzliach sein. If you're going on the right path, and you know where you're going, and you see that you are on the right path, there is no way that you can fail. There's no way to fail.
He just really never seemed to be afraid to keep trying and trying. Look at the school, you look at Memphis, and you look at all the impact that he's had on many different people. You see it spreading so beautifully.
One man could make a flame that is so powerful that it continues all over the world. And I think about the responsibility that we have to take what one man began 70 years ago and to bring it into the future. Ultimately, we hope to be able to greet Mashiach.
I think you've just seen a remarkable film. I know I have. I look at this film and I understand that you probably have two choices right now. One choice is to say, oh, that was a nice film. You know, let me call my friend, let me text him and tell him to watch also. That's a great thing. But there's a second choice, and the second choice is far greater. The second choice is, what impact did it make on you? Can it really move you? Can it really help you change? Can it really motivate you to do something a little bit out of the box, something a little bit different? That's the second choice, and I believe that's the real choice. You just watched a man who was a Talmid Chacham Mufla. He was an incredible human being, and he had a tremendous breadth of knowledge in all aspects of Torah. And yet, it was not beneath him to teach Aleph Beis. It was not beneath him to sit and explain pasuk by pasuk, simple translation. He did what he needed to do. He knocked on doors. He never said, oh, I'm not for this. This is not for me. This is for somebody else to do. He's a man who took real achrayus. Are you that person? Do you have that, as I mentioned earlier, that little piece of Rab Nota in you? Is that inside of you where you could say, you know what, I could do something like that. No, I'm not going to Birmingham, Alabama. No, I'm not going to Tyler, Texas. But am I going next door? Am I going to meet somebody in the mall? Am I going to get out of my comfort zone like I finally do, like I've promised myself so many times before, but just never did it? Is this going to be the time that I say, he inspired me, and I'm going to do something that, for me, is the extra mile? That's the question. That's the challenge. That's what I'm asking you today. Can you take this film and say, oh, wonderful, we enjoyed it so much? That doesn't matter. The question is, what will it do to you? What will it do for the Jewish people? What will you do for the Jewish people? And you can do a lot more than you think. Look what he did. Don't say that I can be him. Just say I can be me. And me means that I can do something that can change the lives of one person, of two people, not the entire country. That's how you build. That's how you make change. That's how Klal Yisrael comes together. That's the promise. You can sign up right now with Project Inspire. You can say, I want to learn with someone. I want to speak with someone. Oh, but I don't know what to say. We'll help you. We'll teach you. We'll hold your hand. We'll take that trip together. When we go together, we have so much power. We do one by one by one. That's how we build the bricks. That's how we change a community. That's how we change the world. And that's how we rebuild the Beis HaMikdash. That's Tisha B'Av, in doing something that will be memorable, will change their lives, and by the way, change your life as well. This is your chance. Don't let it slip by. It's a strong appeal for you to become the greatest person that you can be and to walk that extra mile. And with that, you'll be able to actually rebuild the Beis HaMikdash, bring Bayis Shlishi down from Shemayim together. Ba'esh hitzata u'va'esh ata osid levnoisa. Ad b'yisrael tzedek, m'heirav yameinu, amen.
One summer, we were visiting in Memphis over Tisha B'Av. And what I saw on Tisha B'Av of my father-in-law, I've never seen before, and I've never seen since. I saw a man sit on the floor and mourn the Beis HaMikdash in a way that I've never seen anybody mourn the Beis HaMikdash. I've never seen a person who lost a loved one mourn in the deep way that he mourned. Fast forward a number of years. My family has had the privilege of going in the summertime to a Kiruv program, Sinai retreats. We've been going for many, many years. One summer, it came out that the retreat was going to be over Tisha B'Av. There's probably close to 25 secular young Jewish women most of whom never even heard of Tisha B'Av before. So after they read the Megillah, after they read Eicha, so I took the girls and we went into a corner of the dining room and we sat on the floor. And I explained a little bit about Tisha B'Av and tried to capture a little bit of what we've lost. And then I shared with them my visit to Memphis on Tisha B'Av and what I witnessed of my father-in-law mourning for the Beis HaMikdash. The program ended. Many of the girls went to Israel, some didn't. One girl in particular stands out from that program, who went to Israel, became a Shomeres Mitzvos, married, parenthetically a student of my son's at Ar Sameach, and has a beautiful family now. And I met her some time later, and I said to her, when did you decide that this is something that maybe you really need to pursue in your life? And she said to me, it was Tisha B'Av night, when we were sitting on the floor, and you told us about your father-in-law crying for the Beis HaMikdash. And I said to myself, if a man who's a scholar, thousands of years later, can sit and really mourn and cry about a building that was destroyed more than 2,000 years ago, then I better find out what that is. And that was her turning point.